presentation. And now we're going to go to questions. And first up with questions is Councillor Hubley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Mr. Hoban, you certainly provided a good rationale as to what you're trying to do here. One thing I don't think I heard you mention that I understood was part of the rationale for needing to increase the height is the fact that you had to go from a single layer garage to 2 stories of parking to get more cars underground and off the view or the ground level. Is that correct?
That's actually not correct. The 2 levels of parking are quite independent of that. What we did provide was parking at grade, which couldn't be handled at Oblatz Avenue. So it caused us to separate the building so we can provide parking on both sides. But it's not, that doesn't solve the parking requirement for the building. We have 2 levels of parking down below that connect the 2 buildings.
But when it was the original plan for 6, was it not just 1 story of parking underneath and then you added 2? Or was it?
No, it was independent, an independent choice actually to go with a higher ratio of parking because of the area. Okay. It wasn't related at all to 6 to 9.
It's not. Okay. No. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Blais? You're fine? Anybody else have questions of the sorry. Anyone else have questions of the applicants? So Councillor Leeper, I guess that's it. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Barry, can you pull up slide 20? I believe it's from your deck. We've talked a lot this morning about the degree to which secondary plans should be. Okay. No, oh, I want to take a look at the trees on the Grand Allée in relation to the building, and you had a perspective that showed both 2A and 2B. Thank you. That's the one. Yeah. So we've chatted a fair bit this morning about the degree to which secondary plans have a certain sanctity or not, and as you know, I have a significant sympathy for sticking to the plans. We plan for growth and then we stick to the plans. But sometimes, as Mr. Chown and I have worked together on, we can see rezonings when there's a clear public interest to be achieved. So one of the first things I want to try to understand here is, I think you said that the 9-story development better protects the trees. Did I mishear or misunderstand that?
You did misunderstand it. Okay. What I was trying to, and my poor communication style, and you talk about stick to the plan, but as we got further into this and then surveyed all the trees, regardless of the property line, our advice from the arborist was you need to step back another 6 meters from the property line in order for those trees to survive. Okay. So that is a piece of unfolding information, just as we found out about soils or other things, and the ultimate width of Oblatz, which altered us from the master plan, so to speak. So that came after, but it had to do with the preservation of the trees, and the trees, everyone felt, were a foundational piece of the Grand Allée.
Of course.
Okay.
Did the same restriction apply or the constraint applied to 2A as well?
Same constriction applied to 2A.
So
both of them are set back.
There's no need, and I guess what I would get at then is that, is there a need to go to a 9-story building from 6 in order to preserve the trees? Because that's what I thought I heard in your presentation.
What I tried to say by way of this diagram, it's accumulation on the site which shapes those 3 things. One is the tightness with respect to Oblatz Avenue. Yeah. 2 is the setback from the trees. And since Oblatz is so tight, the idea of having some support parking for servicing and drop-off, and it has to come off of that, which caused us to separate the buildings. Okay. So it's accumulation of those 3 things, and then above that, when you get into the detailed design and cross-section of kind of mitigate mass, that further was a factor. But these three things actually shape things more influentially than anything else.
So did those three result in the need to squeeze the building onto a smaller footprint and up? Because you didn't need to do that for the 6-story at 2A.
That would be my point, and I think you and I have both spoken on this, but 2A and 2B are actually designed together as set pieces. We took 2A ahead of 2B just to make sure that it was approved. But in fact, the accumulation between those two things, you know what, really talking about design of those two things as they go together. And it's much more fine-grained than just the simplistic notion we took the massing and put it there. So they're designed to be two different buildings by way of identity, so that the 60-meter block cadence resulted in two different forms. And so diversity of form, I think, is absolutely important in terms of creating a better neighborhood.
When moving forward with 2A, why not talk to the community about 2B as a 9-story at that time?
Well, actually, we have been talking about 2A and 2B for quite a while.
2B as a 9-story?
Yes,
Okay.
for quite a while. This is not something that just sort of came up yesterday.
Okay.
I think if I check the dates, we're going back almost a year and a half.
Sounds like there's some disagreement from the gallery there. Okay. So can you help me understand in really simplistic terms a politician can understand, what is the public benefit of allowing this change?
That's a fair question, and I thought I covered it in my presentation, and it's a question that Mr. Shirelli inadvertently has been asking of appellants, of those opposing. It really has to do with the public realm, the appropriate setback for the Grand Allée. So you're talking about heritage, you're talking about functional requirements, so separation between buildings, and everything at the ground plane, enhancing the pedestrian experience. In all of that, it simply adds a transfer of area. If I use this diagram, a simple transfer of a small part of area up here to allow this to open, to allow a greater setback along here, to in fact allow a greater setback of the buildings on top of those. They all go together as cumulatively trying to create a better scheme. Again, a lot of it is about the Grand Allée. It's not just a setback with respect to heritage. It's a setback and a recognition of how important it is. And so the shapes of both of those buildings reflect that. We didn't talk very much about the offsets at the top of 2B, but the zoning diagram quickly shows that. And the buildings are offset in a number of ways, both along Oblats, facing Deschâtelet Avenue, and also the Grand Allée. All of those basically are suggesting, hey, we're going to move some mass around, but the ground floor public experience is still strong. In fact, stronger.
Okay, so it is a question of having to, you've done a density transfer because of the physical constraints of the footprint that you want to work in.
Yes.
Okay.
It's not about density increase. I heard a little bit about that. I heard words like greed and those other things. That's not the case at all. We're actually trying to use the mass that's there and reform it into the most logical response that we possibly can.
But can you use the same footprint and make a 6-story building work? Or do you need that density transfer in terms of numbers of units?
At this point in time, yes, we need that density transfer to make it work. If you're going to look at something else, the impacts with respect to urban design, porosity, setbacks, all of that would be thrown out the window.
Okay. I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Do you have questions of the applicant or just of staff? Okay, so I have a couple of questions. So just building on what Councillor Leeper was saying, the difference in units by going up is 30 units. Did I see that right? I saw 30 units somewhere.
The top three floors may add 30 units, but that doesn't mean it's a density increase. It's actually, instead of filling in the gap and building units there, we built them on top.
And I imagine that you had a tree specialist talk
Yes.
to you about the trees and how to sustain them.
Had to have them all surveyed, and the setbacks from those root balls are absolutely essential in order to preserve them.
I mean, if some of us that were on council last time remember the Minto application on Bank Street and the integrity of that little park, well, it's in your ward now, and the concern and the detail that went into, at Clemo. It went into Clemo, I think, Fifth Avenue? One of the two. Yeah, and it was the, I mean, we actually, to preserve the tree, and let's face it, in this development, we went to some extents to have you preserve a tree. But that's why I'm asking. So you had an expert say
Yeah,
this is how big the root ball is to sustain the,
We had the land surveyed and an arborist as part of the team come up with that setback.
so when we go to questions of the staff, I want Ms. Coots to be commenting on the value, the heritage value of the trees along the Grand Allée from heritage perspective. And if that's not yet, because we're not into that. Does anyone have any questions further of the applicants? No? Okay. You were on the list before. Do you have questions of the staff? Yeah. Is Councillor Menard the only person that has questions of staff? Okay. Well, you probably do. Who are we kidding? I don't even know why I asked that question. I knew you would. So we'll go to him first, and then we'll go to you, okay? Oh, you have a question too? Okay, I'm on to staff now. So who has questions of staff? You do. So Leeper, Gower. Yeah. All right. And then you, Sean. Okay. All right, Councillor Leeper.
So for staff, once...
Councillor Leeper, probably, do you want to introduce this other motion? Do you have it yet?
let me talk to my colleague.
It's, okay, time out, Councillor Menard. You're going to want this introduced, I think, by him. Well, I thought we should do it now, but he wants to talk to you.
No, we're good?
You're
Okay.
good?
I'll
It's
introduce him.
beside you. Okay, and then I'm going to ask you, Aaron, have you seen this? Has the applicant seen it? Okay, can we just take another few minutes till that happens again? This is the new one, yeah. Leeper is going to move this. Councillor Menard, people are, I suggest you sit down for a minute, just to, since really this is your motion, except that somebody else has made. So, Councillor Menard, the colleagues are asking, is this a replacement motion for the other, or is it a different motion? Can we give, thank you.
It's, no, Madam Chair, it goes along with that motion. It takes care of the issue that Ms. O'Connor had pointed out. So it's just making sure that we take care of that issue in the first motion.
So it's not a replacement is the answer. And Aaron, can you comment on it?
Certainly, Madam Chair, as I drafted the motion. So it, as the councillor alluded to, goes along with the first motion. If the decision is made by planning committee and council to change the wording in the secondary plan to talk about a range of building heights between 3 and 6 stories, that we then have a circumstance where we have 2 buildings where zoning permissions were already granted within there for heights greater than 6 stories. So this motion changes the designation in the secondary plan for those 2 particular sites to the brown designation, which permits up to 9 stories.
So it's correcting the already built,
Yes,
if the new motion is approved
that's correct.
and not the staff motion. Okay.
So I'll read it, but I'm going to skip.
Well, we're going to put it on the screen. Is it on the screen now? It's on the screen now, so I don't think you need to do that. But now, questions of staff, and then questions, Councillor Gower, and then Councillor Menard. Anyone else wants to, before I get to Councillor Menard, because he is the councillor for the area, so I'd like him to have the last wrap-up kind of stuff. Okay, so please chime in before that happens.
Thanks, Chair. I just have one question of staff, which is the UDRP comments hinted strongly or suggested that the building height should be brought down. Why, again, and you know what, this relates to more than just this building. We see the UDRP time and time again suggest that building heights should be brought down in order to result in better design. And I can't remember the last time that the suggestion by UDRP to reduce height on a development, including this one, was taken, where staff said, yes, we're going to back the UDRP up. Why are staff of the opinion that the UDRP is wrong with respect to building height?
Through you to Madam Chair, I wouldn't take it as a position that UDRP is wrong. Certainly the application that was before the UDRP, there was a number of changes that were made to the design based on their feedback, including some additional step backs on the upper 3 stories, some changes in terms of materiality, working with Hoban's office to reflect more the situation along Oblates Avenue and the Grand Allée, and those are found in the report, some of the changes that were made. In terms of the actual height itself, I very much appreciate the advice that we get from the Urban Design Review Panel. They are acting as an advisory body to staff, so we take their recommendations into consideration, as well as the recommendations or the comments that we see through the public circulation, through other technical agencies, and use that in terms of formulating our recommendations and discussions with applicants moving forward. So I wouldn't suggest that it's not a necessary agreement with her. They had a slew of comments, and we took those under advisement and made some changes to the proposal based on that feedback. In the situation related to the specific heights, we reviewed those heights with the changes to the step backs and didn't feel those 3 additional stories represented undue adverse impact on the surrounding communities in terms of impacts. And so that's what we made our recommendation based on.
Thank you. Councillor Gower.
I actually wanted to bring up the heritage question that you raised, Madam Chair. Okay. So could heritage staff just offer some comments and context around both the impact of this, of what's before us on the trees in the Grand Allée as well as in the Châtelet building itself?
Thank you, Chair Gower. The designated parcel associated with the 175 Main Street includes the long tree-lined alley leading to the building, the forecourt in front of the building, and the building itself. The actual alley is fairly recent. It's from the 1950s when St. Paul University was built. The driveway changed, or the access to the building changed, but we considered that as a landmark within the heritage context that it was worthy of inclusion in the designation. So the proposed, when the Grand Allée was included as part of the designation, it was recognized that it was going to there was going to be a built-up edge adjacent to it outside of the actual designated boundary. So that has been consistent since the beginning of the plans, that this would be, as opposed to a driveway that historically went through open space, it would now be flanked on either side eventually by buildings. And that the concern was to preserve the buildings there, or the trees and their root balls, et cetera, so they could continue. We've also worked with the developer to ensure that there's succession planting going on, so that the essence, the tree-lined essence of the boulevard or of the road continues. So that has been, part of our ongoing concern. And again, in terms of the location of the building and of the new building, its impact on the alley, it has the same impact as we had always anticipated in terms of proximity to the alley. And of course, a 6-story building or a 9-story building either is taller than the tallest tree along the edge. So that takes us to the impact of an additional 3 stories on the cultural heritage value of the Châtelet building at 110 meters away, separated by what will be townhouses. And the general conclusion of heritage staff, and which was also the same conclusion of the heritage consultant hired by the applicant, is that the additional 3 stories do not have a noticeable impact on the cultural heritage value of the designated building. And the reason, the outstanding features, what we call the heritage attributes of the building, are its stone construction, its style, and its style and its massing with the pavilions, all very typical of religious architecture. Its windows, front door, and so those are all, none of those attributes are shielded or screened or impacted by the additional 3 stories. So that's the opinion of the heritage staff on the impacts of the proposed development on the building.
Okay, thank you. I had one more question, and it was a line that stood out to me in the councilor's comments in the staff report, that legal did not agree with planning staff's interpretation of the site, which I think is worth diving into. I think that was in reference to the original report that this committee would have considered several months back. Is that correct, Councilor Menard? So I guess my question now would be, does legal staff agree with planning staff's interpretation that's in front of us today?
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Chair. My name is Garrett Strom with Legal Services, Legal Counsel. Legal staff has conducted a review of the official plan in the course of this application to consider the ambiguity that we've discussed today. It's already been pointed out that there are 2 provisions, 2 policies under section 10.2.1 of the secondary plan. One which says that no buildings will be allowed higher than 6 stories, except where there's an exception in the official plan. And then policy 4, which states that in the medium rise area, there will not be buildings in excess of 9 stories. Legal staff's opinion upon review was that this is resolved by, or the most reasonable interpretation is to look to section 10.3.4 of the current secondary plan, and in particular, policy 4F, which deals with, refers to a range of heights between 5 and 9 stories for the residential medium rise designation, but does not refer to the mixed use medium rise designation. Accordingly, in our view, the most reasonable interpretation, and the reason why we recommended that an official plan amendment be brought in the current case was because of this ambiguity and the fact that the reasonable interpretation in our view was that it didn't currently provide for 9 stories.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So no one else before I go to Councilor Menard? Councilor Menard?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just have some questions, and then I guess we'll get into debate and comments on the motions after.
Yes, please.
Okay. So questions to staff. Is Regional Group the only landowner for whom these changes would affect in that area? Are they the only major landowner?
Thank you, Councillor. I'm just going to go to the secondary plan designation slide, just so we have that in front of us. So the official plan designation area that we're talking about, the mixed-use medium-rise designation, is in the pink. My understanding in terms of the landowners, and I'd have to clarify with those particular landowners, but that the landowners of that pink would be Regional Homes or their underlying companies. St. Paul University owns lands along the Grande Allée, as well as a retirement home entity has bought a portion of the property from Regional Homes for the building under construction right now.
Okay, thank you very much. If you could actually go back to the last slide was actually a little clearer. Was it that one or the one before? No, bigger. I'm looking for bigger on that area. It was up. I guess that's fine. So this site is about, the entire pink site is about 13 acres, I guess, somewhere around there, about 13, 14 acres. It's about half of the total area.
I'd have to verify that, but that sounds approximately.
Okay. And Regional Group owns a big portion of that, but St. Paul University owns a very, very large chunk of that as well. So the other side of the Grande Allée is essentially exclusively owned by St. Paul University. Have they submitted a position on this application?
I had a brief review this morning of comments before Planning Committee and saw that there was an objection from St. Paul University.
Okay, and they're a major landowner there and would obviously be very, very affected by this. I guess in your opinion, How would you characterize the initial process in this community to develop a large piece of what was green space before, to put in place a secondary plan CDP, working in conjunctions with the partners, knowing that new intensification was happening? Would you describe that as a fairly good process overall to this point?
It's a similar process that I've had with other applicants in terms of moving forward with changes for zoning amendment applications.
Okay, very good. I think so too. I think it's been a similar process, but generally a good process. I wanted to go back to legal as well. In your legal service review of the site, I just want to make sure we clarify, how did you interpret the secondary plan in terms of allowable heights for the mixed-use medium-rise area? I just want to confirm that in your interpretation, because there's been a lot of bandied about what this allowed, but in your legal services review, it was fairly clear to you that if this went to LPAT, the interpretation would be 6 stories in the medium use, mixed rise medium use.
Madam Chair, in response to the councillor's question, legal services opinion was that in the event this went to an appeal, a likely interpretation would be that 6 stories are currently permitted. However, we recognize the ambiguity that I discussed in my previous comment.
Okay, and also with this, if this were to be approved, the staff recommendation, in your professional opinion, would it allow a developer an advantage in terms of going up to 9 stories if they were in front of LPAT versus if the secondary plan stayed the same or if my motion was approved? In any area of this, not just 2B, obviously this is a huge area.
Did you say was or wasn't approved at
If
the end?
If the planning staff's recommendation were to be approved, would this offer a benefit for a developer in this case to appeal other areas at LPAT and have an advantage versus what is there now up to 9 stories? I hope I'm
As
being
opposed
clear.
to your motion?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor, can I clarify, were you referring to an appeal of a specific bylaw, or are you referring generally as to whether the secondary plan should inform zoning amendments?
Yeah, I guess if the developer were to come with an application and the zoning recommendation may have been different than 9 stories, say 6 stories, but then they chose to appeal that at LPAT with the official plan saying that this area allowed 9 stories, what advantage would that provide versus what's there now?
Thank you,
Would there be an advantage at LPAT?
Madam Chair, I would say that the any subsequent applications within the mixed-use area, if it were to be redesignated as contemplated in the current recommended staff recommended report, would have to, any subsequent applications for zoning bylaw amendments would be looking towards the the secondary plan for compliance. So they should comply with the secondary plan. So in that case, they could argue that a 9-story building would comply with the amended secondary plan.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's my concern, is that this is not just the 2B building. This is a large swath of area, Madam Chair, that we're designating fully here. But the contention is around sort of 2B and the zoning piece. But actually, what is changing is St. Paul University's lands, as well as everything else around the site, which has been discussed. So I just want to make sure that was very clear as well. I think that's it for me on questions for staff. I want to get into some of the discussion on the motions.
Okay. Does anyone and did I not say to ask those before he asked his? I did. Okay, Councillor Schwell, you all heard me, right? You did.
This is based on Councillor Menard's question. He asked if St. Paul had issued an objection. You said they had, so I'm asking what that objection was. And bear in mind, I've had difficulty accessing my email for the last 12 hours, so.
Councillor, unfortunately, I don't have that objection letter in front of me, so I can't speak to the specifics. I know generally speaking, they submitted something that I briefly reviewed this morning, so I'd have to refer to our staff to provide that actual.
Apparently, Councillor Gower can tell me.
Okay.
let the minutes show that Rick Shirelli is reading Councillor Gower's screen right now. Let that be reflected in the minutes of the meeting.
Okay, so the objection is basically that there was an agreement and the application for an amendment is outside the agreement.
Anyone else? Anyone have, because I'm going to, afford Councillor Menard the wrap-up for sure, again, as is the normal case. Does anyone else have anything else to say? For sure. For sure? No, no, oh no, oh no. See, that's not the way it goes. So it's going to be just like, when the mayor asks that question and it's wrap up and then it's his turn to speak, it's his turn to speak and no one else. So I'm trying to be, I am being very fair here. So Councillor Menard doesn't seem to be, and no one else is going to be speaking. The floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. I do have several comments about this, obviously. I think the delegations made some good points about the secondary plan, what had put in place here just very recently, as well as the zoning amendments in 2015. And Madam Chair, I think it's important that we don't just dismiss that portion of it. I'm going to get to Councillor Shirelli's points in a second. I think it's important we don't dismiss that piece. And I think I've been here most meetings that you've held. I think I may have missed one, but I've been here otherwise, and I'm not on the committee. And I remember one of the first meetings we had talked about the excitement of the official plan and how important that is. And most recently, I've been excited about it too. I held a meeting with 200 residents that came out, 200 residents that really excited about the official plan to come out and talk about it and what they want to see in it. And I'm currently engaging in a consultation on the Bank Street height and character study right now. And the word back from our staff there is that this is important because it gets it in the official plan. So there's more teeth there. We're going through an official plan update where we want to see engagement. We want to make sure that people are allowing the time to engage in that meaningfully. And I think that if we so easily change a plan that has been decided just a few years ago, it's tough to go out and make the case to our residents who we want to be excited about the official plan to meaningfully give that input and to say that this is going to be something that they're going to take the input and it's going to be adhered to when we see it in the plan. And so I do have concerns about us ignoring community plans in the first place. And this is not just a CDP. This is a secondary plan. Have you heard legal staff say that secondary plan would have teeth in front of LPAT, that should be 6 stories, and that was decided just recently. On Building 2B, specifically to Councillor Shirelli's points, there are several reasons that this shouldn't go forward as planned. One of the biggest ones is the Urban Design Review Panel's discussion. And this was in some of the report, but the panel suggests that a symmetry of height would likely better frame the Grand LA, and the panel has concerns in terms of relatability with the heritage context and the proposed height of 9 stories for Building 2B. They go on to say that reducing the architectural contrast between 2A and 2B would establish a better dialogue between the two buildings. The panel agrees that the Grand LA is leading to the Des Chalets building is the key element of the master plan. So in areas where there's 9 stories on this plan, the community has accepted those. And it's not as prominent or as important as it is along the Grand LA. And they make that point very, very clear. This is different than other areas of the site where there's been height allowed, and the community has gone along with that height allowed. They're of the opinion that the proposed buildings must appear as background buildings, which are handsome and relatable to the heritage building, and which frame the Grand LA from Main Street to its terminus. This does not do that. On the density question, this is key. You heard it from the developers in this case on density. This does not add new density at all. This is a question about surface parking. You could take out a portion of that surface parking and get the exact same density, and you could still have a walkway through. In fact, Regional had proposed this previously. They actually came with a design that had that. A full building on the site, and then a walkway through that wouldn't be a 21-meter walkway, but it would still be a walkway through and accessible with the same number of units. And to your question, I think this committee considers density a lot, right? And so, what has been the density projections on this site? The initial projections were 915 units in this area, about 915. I think it was 916. And the actual projection of density on this site now is 1,160. So this community has accepted density. They've gone along with it. They want to see that there. They do want intensification. It's about where and how you do it. That's not happening with this building. You're not doing that with this building. So it's incredibly important to think about the density and what publicly are we gaining? What is Ottawa gaining by this? Sure, it could be allowable, but what do we actually gain? We don't gain density. We're not gaining affordable housing. We're not gaining a community that's going to willfully accept this area and not show any adversity to it. So I just ask you to take that into your mind of what we actually would gain as a city. There are other buildings on this area that the community has negotiated with Regional on and talked with them about, where they haven't objected to them, that go higher than this height. And so, make sure that you consider that as well. They've done that. They've worked with them collaboratively throughout the entire process to allow more height on this building and are not afraid of that. I think at the heart of the question, some people will ask, why can't the community compromise on this? And the answer to that is that they've compromised repeatedly and explicitly. They used to have a large portion of green space here that was used regularly. They could have fought that conversion, as is happening in Canada now. There's a fight going on there over green space. That could have happened here, but it didn't. They instead worked with the Oblate Fathers, who had a planned community, to make sure there was a CDP put in place. They could have fought the conversion. They have allowed higher buildings on the site, as I've said, depending on their location, and they've not fought them. They're not opposed to that height. They've accepted much more density than is originally proposed. They are compromising. They've compromised on a series of 2015 zoning amendments as well. It wasn't just the 2011 plan. They compromised there too and worked with that developer. So I think that they've been nothing but excellent partners. And I've said this to the developer too. I actually have appreciated a lot of the work we've done together on a bunch of the other site, and they've done some good work on this other site. And I actually asked them before coming here, I said, look, let's just work together on this. Don't make this a fight. You can get your density that you want out of here, and we'll work on the buildings behind Deschâtelet. There's 3 major buildings planned there. They're not yet approved, Madam Chair. They're still to come, and there's going to be a lot of density there, and there's a lot of investment and profit to come from those. And so I said, let's work on those together. Let's leave this here. Don't take the risk of coming to committee. Work with your counselor, and we're going to get done what you need to get done. We're going to go back to committee and work together. That didn't happen. We shouldn't be rewarding that around this table. We shouldn't reward something that doesn't benefit Ottawa at the end of the day and has been set as a risk in terms of working together. And so I just urge you, let's pass this motion in front of us here today. The other motion that comes with it will take care of the issue that Aaron has identified, and we will have a planned community here where they're going to get what they want. But this risk that's being taken now is not worth it, and we shouldn't encourage that sort of risk-taking in the future. I want the other developers to work with all of you around the table as well. So I do urge you to please support this community, support this motion, and ensure that we have a well-planned community, that we respect our official plan, we respect our secondary plans. That is not like 1970, where we have in Fleury's ward, Madam Chair. We got some Fleury site plans, or design plans from 1970. That's not this. That is not this. This is brand new. So what guarantee can I give to other community members who want to contribute to the official plan if we're going to say a brand new plan is going to be changed for what? For, at the end of the day, not community benefit, not Ottawa public benefit, the benefit of one proponent. And also, St. Paul University. St. Paul University was not consulted on this. They own a huge chunk of this land. They're opposed to this. They don't want this to go forward either. It's not just regional we're talking about here. Hold that in your mind of how important that is. Regional is there, and St. Paul University is there, and they've written a letter of objection to this. Okay, and they were not consulted on this piece. Do not approve the planning staff recommendation here. Make sure let's approve this motion here today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I appreciate all the work that you've put into it. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for meeting with me. And I know that you probably met with others as well, Councillor Menard. You know, I think that we've had a good discussion, or we've had listened to a lot of people, different, certainly supporting, and certainly mostly not supporting today. But I think that when I think about the investment that has been made in this area by this particular company, or any company, but we were fortunate enough to have somebody come along to a community, Old Ottawa East. I look at the fact that Main Street, Complete Street, would not have been done if this wasn't the trigger. I don't think the people sitting around the table would know that. I think that was, how much was that, Councillor Shirley? Over $30 million? I doubt that there'd be the argument to satisfy the footbridge without the intensification here. I think that the LRT station being the proximity, I look at the river front. I mean, in the past, I mean, how many of you have had access prior to any development here to the property? I'm asking you, because I'll tell you, 60 years ago, I can remember beyond that, 65 years ago, I didn't have any access to it when I was across the street from the Wingus's house, if you know where that is, across from the convent. We never had access, so you've got now that linear park. They have taken a brownfield, which was contaminated when my mom and dad swam there at Brentwood Beach as little kids, swinging out on the tree branch over the thing. Spent $7 million, as did the city spend $7 million in your community. That is a benefit. To say that they've done these things for a profit and to argue the fact that this is a huge profit, it's one of the reasons I asked Mr. Hoban, what are we talking about here? It's kind of a wash on the units. And as somebody mentioned, I forget who it was, the reduction from where they could have built those hires to lowers, I don't think that we ever had any comment on that. So while I appreciate, as I said, the work that you've done, I look at the fact that still to come for your community, which never would have happened, a community building. You could not have ever come, Old Ottawa East could not have ever said, hey, we have the capacity, we want a community building or gym or whatever, all the things that we talked about. None of those things. The protection of the Grand Allée from heritage, the investment in that would not have happened. Who would have done it? I don't know. So for me, to have a situation where we have what we have before us, I'm going to be supporting the staff recommendation. I think that the things that I've just said will probably not surprise you that I'm saying that I'm supporting it, but a lot of work by all of you, by a lot of the city staff, certainly by the applicant, has gone into this. And anyway, I'm going to call yeas and nays on this. First of all, we're going to do it on the motion that was first tabled, which is the one that Councillor Leeper moved. This single one, can we put it up on the, it's on the screen? And this one is the one that says the following change is hereby made to the official plan of the City of Ottawa. The Old Ottawa East Secondary Plan is hereby amended to add the following text in between 3 to 6 stories in the mixed use, following the words residential medium rise designation. Number 2, the Old Ottawa East Secondary Plan, section 10.2.1.4 is hereby amended to remove the text, and in the medium rise area will not exceed 9 stories. So on this amendment, yeas and nays. And I just for the record will say that Councillor Dudas became quite ill today, which is why she left the room when she did. Councillor Gower?
No.
Councillor Shirelli?
No.
Councillor Leeper?
Yes.
Councillor Brockington?
No.
Councillor Blais?
No.
Councillor Moffat?
No.
Councillor Hubley?
No.
Vice Chair Tierney?
No.
And myself, no. On the next one? Is that the same vote? Okay, this is the next one that says, whereas there are 2 existing sites within this, these are the 2 that where zoning permits buildings greater than 6 stories, therefore be it resolved, recommend to council that document 2, part B, details of official plan amendment to the Old Ottawa East Secondary Plan be deleted and replaced by the following. Following change is hereby made to the official plan of the City of Ottawa that the Old Ottawa East Secondary Plan Schedule A land use is hereby amended to redesignate part of 225 Scholastic Drive, Greystone Village Retirement Home, and 170 Hazel Street as residential medium rise.
Sorry, doesn't that motion become moot because the first one failed?
That's what I thought, but Mr. Mark, are you paying attention?
Yes, I am, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, what happened in this case, of course, is there are buildings here that are 9 stories which, because the zoning is in place, it is deemed to conform to the official plan. But in light of legal services opinion, the OP provides for 6 stories in this location. It is a tidy up provision, Madam Chair. In legal services opinion, it is not necessary.
That did not help.
So well, to answer the
Do we need
councillor's
to vote on this or not?
question directly, is it moot? No, Madam Chair, it is not made moot
There
by
you
the
go.
first motion. It is a different matter. And so the zoning is fine. It is deemed to conform to the official plan.
Sean.
If you wanted absolute
Sean.
purity, you could do this, but it's not necessary.
I'll withdraw that, Madam Chair. I do have, there
have
is
another-
another motion, though, as a
Okay.
result of the defeat of the first motion. And what the motion does,
This new motion?
this new motion does, just to explain it,
And so just so everybody knows, none of us have this, okay? So none of us have, so please
yes.
explain it.
Yeah.
Point of order, it should be dealt with after the staff recommendation, right?
No. It's on this topic.
So what the new motion does is allow for the 2B site to go forward, that building, but it does not change the rest of the lands in this 13 acres, including St. Paul University's,
Okay.
including St. Paul University's land. So
So we're going to have to recess because
Okay.
you said is it just coming now? She's just receiving it now.
Okay.
So we're going to take a recess because none of us have seen it. Nobody's seen it. So we'll get that. We're only taking a 5-minute recess.
Thank
So
you.
let's say a 7-minute recess. So at 1:30, we're back here. That's it, okay? Don't leave the room. Okay, and we're back. Everyone have a seat, please. We're back. My freaking hand's getting... Okay, so we have, the reason that we have this before us is because it's an amendment, so we cannot, somebody asked me, Councillor Shirelli, I think, asked me why we wouldn't vote on the report first. Now, Ms. O'Connell was asked to write this, which she did. I want her to, I want her to say what her opinion is on it, vis-a-vis the report, and then we'll say to Mr. Mark what this motion does. Okay? So let's start with Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This motion recommends that the staff recommendation related to the official plan amendment be deleted and replaced with a site-specific official plan amendment that is specific to Building 2B. So it's permission, it's site-specific permission to allow for a 9-story building on 2B, but changes nothing else in terms of the ambiguity and issues with the secondary plan that currently exist, with the reference to both the 6 and 9 stories for the remainder of the pink area. Those are still in place if this motion goes forward.
So, question?
Yes, so just a question for legal. Does the application cover all of those other properties that are exempt from this? Like, I think it does.
Mr. Mark, did you hear
Madam
that?
Chair, I'm afraid that would be a question for planning because I think Ms. O'Connor would be more familiar with the application than we are.
Ask the question again, Councillor Shirelli.
So does the application cover all of the other properties that would be exempted by this resolution?
The initial application from Regional
Yes.
was everything in pink, the mixed-use medium-rise, which included that other site. Then the staff recommendation was specific to Greystone, so took the removal of the other site by Mann Avenue. The staff recommendation is to provide clarity in the secondary plan and revise the wording with respect to everything in pink, basically on the screen. And the motion is suggesting to delete those recommendations to the changes to the secondary plan and just do a site-specific official plan amendment to allow 2B to proceed.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Moffat.
So in your opinion, if we approved this one, the ambiguity would still exist on the rest of the site?
That is correct.
So we could be right back in this position with another OP, another OPA and zoning amendment in the future to do this all over again?
We have the benefit of legal's opinion at this point, but there's still a contradiction, in my opinion, and between those two policies that exist in the secondary plan.
All right, thanks.
Can we get a legal opinion? They've
Sorry,
stated very clearly.
Sorry, Madam Chair, the legal opinion I was referring to was the interpretation that the mixed-use medium-rise height limit is 6 meters. It's the one they've already made.
Thank you. Is there any other legal opinion than, from the legal opinion than that she said?
Madam Chair, no, that Ms. O'Connell did summarize the legal opinion correctly. 6 stories.
Okay, so this is an amendment. This is the last amendment. Yeas and nays, Councillor Drudas, Councillor Gower,
No.
Councillor Shirelli?
No.
Councillor Leeper?
It's a yes or no there, Jeff?
Yeah.
You know what? Can I, with all due fairness, okay? There's like, we didn't have any time to think about this motion, right? I'd rather him make a conscientious decision.
Yes.
Councillor Brockington?
No.
Sorry? Councillor Blais?
No.
Councillor Moffat?
No.
Councillor Hubley?
No.
Councillor Tierney? I mean,
No.
Vice Chair Tierney? No. And myself, no. Howard?
Yes.
Councillor Shirelli?
Yes.
Councillor Leeper?
No.
Councillor Brockington?
Yes.
Councillor Blais?
Yes.
Councillor Moffat?
Yes.
Councillor Hubley?
Yes.
Vice Chair Tierney?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Thanks, everybody, for your attention today. It's much appreciated. This is Brian Casagrande, you want to come up to the front, please? Come on forward. Do you don't need Robert Martin? Robert Martin's here as well? No. Okay. All right. So Councillor Leeper, can I have everyone's attention, please? Councillor Leeper, this is on zoning bylaw amendment for 258 Carruthers Avenue. Councillor Leeper, you want to read something into the record?
Yeah, so colleagues, I've just recently received opposition from the Hintonburg Community Association to the proposed development 258 Carruthers. Members of the Hintonburg Community Association have expressed their concerns about the zoning bylaw amendment application for 258 Carruthers and the potential negative impact it will have on the community. Moreover, the applicant and planning staff have failed to address our concerns on the proposals with respect to dwelling unit count. The HCA opposes this application as submitted to the Planning Committee for a zoning bylaw amendment. 258 Carruthers is zoned for 4 units maximum under the R4H zoning. We oppose this proposed 14 units as it undermines the intention of the zoning bylaw. In our view, this proposal is inconsistent with the existing Scott Street Secondary Community Design Plan and the Scott Street Secondary Plan with respect to maintaining the existing residential zoning. The CDP and Secondary Plan included a neighborhood line within which the low-rise stable residential area is to be maintained. This was understood to mean that the R4 zoning will be continued. We are aware that the city is currently studying the R4 zoning and may change it to permit up to 8 units. This proposal far exceeds even what is envisioned as a possible revision to the R4 zoning. Should the city approve this application, it will set a precedent that will be exploited by developers and add to current residents' uncertainty as to the number of units that will be approved. It also continues an unfortunate pattern of the city doing studies, in this case the R4 study, which then are essentially obsolete before the study has even been completed. Therefore, we call on the Planning Committee to reject the request for 14 units and to adhere to the zoning for this location. This would demonstrate to residents that the city is serious about ensuring that there is certainty around zoning restrictions and not signal that the R4 zoning study will be obsolete by the time it is completed. I think many of you know the Hintonburg Community Association. They are a pragmatic community association with a lot of sophistication in planning matters. You may be familiar with the R4 study. The R4 study is taking zones like this one, which are what we call the junior R4s, restricted to 4 units, and it's going to upzone a lot of those junior R4s. The Hintonburg Community Association here is saying it's unlikely that the R4 study is going to upzone those junior R4s to allow as many as 14 units. So I'm going to be opposing the application today, and I hope you will do the same. Given that I'm relatively recent to the HCA's objection, I'll also be working over the course of the next 2 weeks with the applicant and with the community association to see whether or not there is some kind of a compromise that is possible. So, Chair, I don't know if you want to give the applicant Brian or his client a chance to respond, but I would ask for your help today by rejecting this application.
Okay, Brian, you have the floor. Press the button. You know how it goes. If you'd like to make any comments in rebuttal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brian Casagrande with FO10 Consultants here before you on behalf of the owner of the subject lands. Yes, I must admit I wasn't expecting to have to speak today. My understanding going into today was that the Community Association was actually supportive of the project. The owner has made a lot of concessions with the proposed development over the period of the application. Staff were certainly supportive of it. From my perspective, this could have been an application that I could have taken in the past to the Committee of Adjustment. The permissions, if you will, that are before this committee are not significant. We're not asking for additional height. The rear yard setback is the most meaningful relief sought relative to the building envelope, and it's above 6.5 or in the 6 meters setback. There's no rear balconies proposed. That was a request of the community association.
No,
And the existing building is set back virtually on the property line on the subject property. Maybe should I take questions now?
well, Councillor Blais, do you have a question of anybody?
I guess it's a comment and a suggestion. Given that it was a surprise to the councillor that there were some objections, I think, based on how you presented it, and there were some surprises to the applicant that there were some objections, and the councillor has said he wants to work with the applicant and the communities, perhaps we should move this to one meeting to provide that opportunity for that to happen.
It's August the 22nd.
It's a
Pardon?
month. Yeah, it's a month and a half.
Yeah, it doesn't matter as far as the council meeting it would go to, because it won't go to the next council meeting. But seriously, I mean, if you have been working on this, and I know that you work on things in your community, and the community's engaged, and at the very last minute, we're having a change in direction, if that is the case, then that's very surprising.
I think it is an unusual situation, but I do have hopes for a successful compromise if we can defer this.
Madam Chair, I guess this, I mean, my style is to normally embrace that. I just, in this situation, I would much rather have the committee consider the application. I think the merits are very strong. There are 14 units effectively within 600 meters of the LRT station, the Tunney's Pasture LRT station.
I think I've made up my mind. I think that you can vote on referral if you want, but I think that we take a vote on it today. You work on it with the community before council. The council's not until the 27th, 28th of August, okay? So until the council votes on it, it's not final, but let's take a committee vote today, or support deferral. Does that sound like something, Councillor Blais, that we can leave it in the hands, we vote on it today, leave it in his hands, and I think that this gets them too, right, Councillor Hubley?
I'd like to hear from Councillor Leeper. Can you get this done in 2 weeks, or do you need
It's not 2 weeks, though. It's not coming until the end of August, regardless. Yeah. July 10th. It's coming July 10th? Okay, sorry.
I can have a better answer for this committee within a couple of weeks, by the time council is happening for sure.
Okay, so please send it back, so let us know, okay? Rather than what would happen today earlier, I'd like to have some time to actually contemplate it. So do we still have a deferral on the table, or can we vote on it, and then if there needs to be any change, be changed at? So on the report or on deferral? On the report. Carried? Dissent. Okay, so we're going to leave it in your trustee hands, right? So you have we've carried the report today, and if there's something that needs to be discussed further, you're going to let us know. Okay?
So just so I'm clear, Madam Chair, there could be a motion going to council along with the recommendation for approval?
There could potentially, if it changes,
That's
but
what's
you'll be part of it too, which doesn't mean you have to be part of the meetings.
I'll either be looking at an amending motion at council or lobbying my colleagues to.
That's the case on anything,
Of course,
right?
yes.
We know that.
Just trying to follow the bouncing ball. Thank you.
Yeah, well, and the ball has been bouncing all day, because we have not been, and I'm going to do my best to change that, because right off the bat, at the beginning of this meeting, I said, could we have all of the motions? Okay, it's not just for us, although it's helpful if the people that are making the decisions have a little bit of time to think about something. It's really nice if the people that came out to listen to us and to participate have it, and it's actually very fair for the applicant to have it as well. That did not happen today, and I think that we need to make some changes to make sure that that happens. I'm doing my best by saying that it comes up earlier, but on this one, right now, Planning Committee has supported this with one dissent. It's going to go with the recommendation of the planning approval to council. If something happens, but that can happen, my point is, on any item, right?
Yes, I understand.
That's why we changed the Tuesday to the Thursday for planning committees, because in the past, we could potentially have today, if it was still a Tuesday, go the next day to council, right?
Understood, yeah.
So we changed that specifically for this purpose, so there is time to do that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of committee.
Thank you.
So now on to item 3 of 11.
And now, number 3, we have, this is the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 16 and 20 Hamilton Avenue, and we do have speakers that are opposed. First up, we have, and Steve Gauthier is our planner. This is in Councillor Leeper's ward, and first up is Wanda Gunno. Wanda Gunno? Followed by Richard Moore. Are there any motions on this item that we haven't seen yet? I'll come up with something. No, don't work too hard on it. Okay. Yeah, sure. Hopefully the mics don't fail you. What? Okay, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee.
Can you speak up, pull it
Sorry.
closer to you and speak directly into it if you can?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Wanda Gunno, and this is my husband, Richard Moore. We live at 89 Hinton Avenue North, which is one of the properties directly behind this proposed development. We've lived at this address since 1996. Before I begin, I'd like to just make a correction to the report to Planning Committee. It describes the houses on Hinton Avenue as converted single detached buildings. In fact, 2 of the 4 existing houses are still houses that have been there for 100 years. They've been maintained and renovated, but not converted to other uses. They're single detached homes.
Single detached, you said?
Sorry?
Single detached?
Yes.
Okay, we'll correct that.
And single family, they're not converted. Richard and I became involved in zoning and planning almost immediately after buying our house. The Scott Wellington Review was underway, and we attended many meetings with the city, property owners, and developers as we hammered out suitable zoning for this area. Since that zoning bylaw, there have been many reviews of the zoning in this area, but the following concepts have remained. Parkdale Park and Market are our most valuable community assets. Parkdale Park is a community focal point with festivals and events throughout the year. There's a well-used playground located in Parkdale Park. Zoning on Hamilton Avenue should be a wraparound of the TM zone, formerly neighborhood linear commercial, on Wellington Street. We attended 2 meetings with Surface Development when this proposal was discussed. They came to the Hintonburg Community Association Zoning Committee meeting, and then we've had a public meeting. At both meetings, this proposal was met with almost universal opposition. We are opposed to the application to amend the official plan and rezone 16 to 20 Hamilton Avenue for the Hamilton Avenue North for many reasons. The CDP for this area was completed less than 10 years ago after countless hours of input by the community, city planning, and business community. Approving this project negates all of this work. The impact of this action does not just affect a small area of Hintonburg. It will create instability and uncertainty about any zoning. In the past, the result of instability has been land holding with dilapidated buildings, weed and garbage-filled properties, and hesitation to upgrade buildings while waiting to sell to a developer. This undermines the entire neighborhood. And I'd like to speak about parking. This project has 63 parking spaces, 49 resident, 6 office, and 8 visitor. However, it uses its proximity to Tunney's Transit as the rationale for increasing height to 8 stories. With 63 parking spaces, mass transit is clearly not a priority for this development. Parkdale Avenue and Wellington Street are already an all-day gridlock with multiple failed intersections. We cannot add an additional 63 cars to this area from one single building. In addition to the dangerous and difficult traffic problems in this area, the entrance to this building is directly across from Parkdale Park, which is essentially a playground. I've heard the argument that cars will not be coming and going all at the same time, But 63 cars, especially the 8 visitor and 6 office spaces, will create a hub of traffic at this building. Other developers that have approached the community with significant increases in height have contributed significant community assets. For example, Windmill Developments added the Irving Greenberg Theatre for an additional 2 stories. The historically important Bethany Hope Center building and grounds were upgraded and maintained for density transfer. During the open house about this project, I asked the developer if there would be any contribution to the community for increase in height, and I was told there would not. So the proposed development will tower over our primary community asset, Parkdale Park, and dump endless cars into a street across from a playground. But this developer will do nothing to add to this community.
So what we have now is the current CDP easily meets the intensification targets. What is not clear from the report?
What is not clear from the report to the Planning Committee are the number of approved units not yet completed on Hinton and Hamilton Avenues. We have 12 Hamilton with 30 condo units, 84 to 96 Hinton Avenue North, 140 apartment units, 85 Hinton Avenue North, 30 rental units. All of these projects have been approved without an official plan amendment or rezoning, and we did not oppose any of these projects going ahead. The front of this building will have small trees because of the hydro lines on the west side of Hamilton Avenue. There should be large trees with potential to grow quickly planted in the rear yard to contribute to the urban forest and minimize the impact of this building. After living in this area for 28 years, I've seen many proposals for unacceptable development have not been completed. However, usually a rejected proposal is quickly followed by one that adds to the community. Please respect the community design plan and send this proposal back to the drawing board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Leeper has a question.
Do I have a minute to add?
No, you don't.
No, I don't.
But he has a question, so maybe you can put whatever you wanted to say into your response.
So just to situate folks, what is the geographic neighborhood for this proposed development?
This is in the Scott Wellington area of, sorry, are you talking to me?
Please.
This is in the Scott Wellington area of Hintonburg, so it is west of Parkdale Park and Market. It is between Parkdale Avenue and Holland Avenue and north of Wellington.
And this is, so in our secondary plan, this is the mixed use area, which is anticipated to get fairly dense. And you were part of the secondary plan discussions. What is the intended growth pattern through the mixed use area?
Well, the intended use of the mixed use area was to add a gradual transition from the higher density at Tunney's Pasture to the lower density of residential on the south side of Wellington. But the area between, Linda Hoad is going to talk to this, but the area between Armstrong and Wellington actually was kept at 6 stories to provide that transition. So by adding 8 stories in there, we're kind of going up and down instead of just transitioning down to the house form that's on the north side of Wellington. So it was intended as a transition. I have heard that there is density transfer because of some of the historic buildings in that area. There are quite a few. What I've seen in the developers' proposals is such an extreme, it's just laughable. You know, in 18 and 28 stories on a park that's now a parking lot as density transfer, that's never going to be built. Right now we have 18 stories that's approved at the more or less north of Armstrong that doesn't seem anywhere close to being built. So people don't want those big buildings in that area, it seems.
Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Great, thank you. Seeing no further questions to the delegation, thank you for coming out today. Next up, we do have Linda Hoad. Linda,
thank you very much.
If you can come forward. Great, and just before you do that, if I can get you to flip off that other microphone that's on, just so there's no feedback. Great. You're no stranger to this room. In 5 minutes, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members, those of you who are left. I am here actually in my own name today. The last time I was here, I was impersonating someone else. I am a member of the Board of Directors of the Hintonburg Community Association, and you have received the communication that I've sent you. The Hintonburg Community Association has reviewed the staff report, and we urge you to reject this application for an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. As you've heard, the applicant has shown a blatant disregard for the Wellington West Community Design Plan in presenting this application. Our position from the very first pre-consultation meeting has been consistent. Please respect the 6-story height limit in our community design plan. In response to Councillor Shirelli's concerns about why you are here, I would like to submit that there has been no compelling arguments made by the applicant to amend the official plan and the zoning bylaw amendment. The reasons raised to support the application include the LRT. The applicant's consultant has claimed that increased intensification on this site is justified because the Wellington Street West Community Design Plan was adopted before the LRT was an approved project. However, while the LRT had not been funded in 2011 when our plan was done, it was clear to the city and to those who were participating, including myself, that the transitway was going to be changed or replaced by LRT. The exact date was not known, but it was definitely a going concern. The planning rationale for approving this application that's been offered to you is that, quote, the proposed development aligns with the city's growth management strategy and is consistent with the mixed-use center designation in that it will achieve high density and represents compact and mixed-use development in close proximity to rapid transit, end quote. However, the need for further intensification on this site near the Tunney's Pasture LRT station was put to rest by the Scott Street Community Design Plan, which was approved in 2014 when LRT was under construction. This area was included in the study area for that particular plan, but not in the community design plan itself. However, there was a very significant statement made in the report which you received from staff, quote, this area, and that is the mixed-use center designation around Tunney's Pasture Station, is different than many of the other transit stations outside of the downtown core, as this station is located adjacent to Tunney's Pasture and is surrounded by existing mixed-use and residential areas that are already close to meeting the minimum density targets for transit-oriented development areas. In addition, this study stated that this area meets the minimum density targets for the mixed-use center, both in the short term and the long term. I would also draw your attention to the comments made by the Urban Design Review Panel, and we concur with these statements. The panel suggested that the mass of the building on this site pushes the envelope in terms of height and setback, resulting in a building that is handsome, however imposing on the surrounding buildings. The panel also is concerned that the project represents overbuilding the lot and suggests capping the building at the 20-meter limit required in the official plan in order to not set a precedent of overdevelopment in this area. The context that has been suggested is suitable for this particular 8-story building is in fact exactly the same context that was there when the community design plan recommending a 6-story height limit was approved. Nothing has changed. The additional height at as has been mentioned, additional height at the Great Canadian Theatre Company was negotiated by our community association in return for locating the theatre in our emerging arts district before there was a Section 37. No such community benefit is being offered by this applicant. As Councillor Shirelli has noted, you are here to decide as to whether or not the secondary plan and zoning bylaw should be amended. I submit that the applicant has not given any valid reasons why you should amend these plans. I'm sure you will have noted, as I have, that in our community design plans and in this application, the language used is almost exactly word for word the same.
Thanks very much.
No,
but I did read your letter.
I have something that's not actually in the letter.
Councillor Leeper can
Okay,
ask you a
thank you.
question, but, you know, I don't want to make a habit of this. 5 minutes is 5 minutes, really is. Go ahead. Yeah, sure you do.
Yeah. So Linda, you and I just want to make sure I understand this properly. The LRT was contemplated when the Wellington West secondary plan was being crafted.
That's certainly my recollection. I think we all knew that it was coming. It was just a question of when would it come.
Yep, there are references in the secondary plan to future light rail stations in the neighborhood. So it was well contemplated, and yet it was decided, you know we need to intensify near transit, and that intensification is going to become less and less the further away you move. The 6-story limit in the block between Wellington to Armstrong Street, is that an arbitrary number? Like, why was 6 chosen by the community, the development community who are at the table, and staff as the appropriate height?
The recommendation was made to continue the transitional Main Street height zoning, and the idea was to turn the traditional Main Street land use around the corner to along the side of the park, in a sense to sort of leak that Main Street and the uses, mixed use, ground-related, and it was recommended actually that the commercial spaces at grade on those buildings along Hamilton Avenue be smaller for local businesses, and if possible related to the Parkdale Market,
Right.
Food-related resources. So it was an extension of the traditional Main Street.
There's a 6-story building that's going in under construction right now next to this property, same builder.
Yes.
Did you object to that?
No, we did not object to that.
It's going in according to plan.
Yes, it meets the zoning bylaw, as have, I think, almost every other building that's been developed since our community design plan. We have been very consistent with applicants to say, we want you to respect our community design plan, and they have done so.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Linda.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Linda. So we have the applicant here now, Brian Casagrande, Ryan Coolwine, and Jacob Ulak. Are you speaking for everybody?
Speaking for Ryan, I'm not sure he couldn't make it.
Okay. Well, let's let Jacob say it first then.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just make a couple of brief comments here. I want to primarily speak to what appears to be the primary concern of both the Community Association and Councillor Leeper, and that is the height and the perception that we are not sufficiently respecting the secondary plan policies. I'm very sensitive to these concerns, and I'm sensitive because I support the goals of the secondary plan as well as the Community Association and what they are trying to achieve. I don't believe that we should be allowing 8-story buildings in every part of Hintonburg. That's not my position. I believe the secondary plan has a foundational role in shaping the growth of this neighborhood, and I fully appreciate that the Community Association fears that this will set the wrong precedent for this neighborhood. Now, I do not think, however, that we should be guided by fear and instead believe that we should be building the right building for this particular site. Legislation allows amendments to the zoning and secondary plans for this exact reason, to give opportunity for the best building to take shape. We've taken great care in conjunction with my architect and my planner, with city staff, the UDRP, consultations with the Community Association and with the councillor to try and craft the best building that we can here, one that respects its context, limits impact, rejuvenates this street, and will further enhance Parkdale Park. Now, I love this neighborhood, and I care deeply about its evolution. I have my office and have had my office in this neighborhood for the last 3 years. I am moving my parents into this building. We are moving our office into this building, and I'm moving here with my wife and my 2 young kids. So, you know, I'm deeply invested in this project, and I want it to be the best building that we can build here. And I hope that you'll all be guided by the incredible opportunity that this building has a potential to bring to this particular site. Thank you.
Hello again, Madam Chair, members of committee. I wanted to respond briefly to some of the comments that have been made on this application. Firstly, with respect to the intensification or justification on this property, there's various reasons why this can be and should be considered. The first is that the parent OP designates this a mixed-use center, which is one of the areas in the official plan where intensification targets are most aggressive. Secondly, even though the LRT was not formally approved, or I should say, even though the LRT may have been known at the time when the secondary plan was approved, it wasn't formally approved at that point in time. So the real question is, how much reliability could that document have placed on that objective? But to be quite honest, this is not the most salient point in these considerations. Since both those secondary plans in this area were approved, the provincial policy statement was updated in 2014, and that also added additional emphasis on intensification near light rail transit. So I think what's most important, though, is this slide that's before you that our office put together recently in hearing about the concerns over I guess, are not respecting the secondary plan and you know, creating problems when you're amending those documents. From my perspective, we're always very hesitant to recommend appeal or amendments, I should say, to official plans and secondary plans when they've been recently adopted. Except the circumstances where I think we would embrace it is when either policy shifts or happened since then, or when a design is an improvement on the as of right or the policy consideration. And this is my honest opinion about this proposal. This document up there on the screen, or this image on the screen, shows in pink what could be done in accordance with the policy framework in a 6-story building. So effectively the same setbacks and step backs that the zoning would want, and increasing the height to a 6-story building in accordance with the policies. There's your pink. And so that area has been calculated by the architect is just under 6,000 square meters. And the 8-story option is something like 215 square meters greater, 3% increase in GFA. It's effectively a single-family home, Madam Chair. So this, to me, is all about handsome architecture and the right way to develop a site. You're looking at the front and rear elevations there, and we've effectively taken that mass and we've squeezed it upwards. And effectively, by doing that, you're taking the impact away from the adjacent properties greater than the as of right, and you're creating a more handsome building. Now, beyond all of this, what is the benefit of this project? The bylaw does not, nor does the policy, require Jacob or his development to do any commercial at grade. Jacob is working rather aggressively to bring in some community retail that can really be complementary to the park space. His other project wasn't able to do that, but effectively this project is going to be able to do that. So from all perspectives, in my view, Madam Chair, members of Planning Committee, I think we're doing the right thing with this project. It's consistent with the general emphasis and the key policies of the secondary plan. It is not throwing those out. All it is effectively saying is, instead of having the building more squat at 6 stories, let's look at bringing it up a couple extra stories to make an 8-story built form work. And the last thing I'd like to say is, it is representing appropriate transition that can't always be anticipated when a secondary plan is being done. And what I mean by that is, north of Armstrong, which is immediately north of this property, despite the fact that the secondary plan envisions 8 stories, which is the same built form proposed here, which is also flanking the park, just like this built form, the zoning allows at least 2 of those significant properties to have buildings that are in the teens and in the 20-story range. So it was done without cognizance of the fact that the zoning would allow something as of right to completely disrespect the eight-story built form. So when those properties develop with those heights, this is going to effectively be a transition from the 6 stories that's permitted along Wellington Street to the greater heights that are permitted north of Armstrong, to the even greater heights as you get closer to the transit station. This is completely in line with your policy approach and the transition policies in the official plan under 411. Thank you.
Does anyone besides Councillor Leeper have questions? No? Councillor Leeper?
So I think the argument they're making, first, the developer and I have worked on other projects in the ward. It was a pleasure to support the 9-story despite some public opposition on Scott Street. I think he builds a good product, but in this case, unfortunately, I do have to disagree with this one moving forward. What is the public benefit here to chipping away at a secondary plan that for many years has given residents some significant certainty in our neighborhood about how it's going to develop? One of the things I say about the Wellington West secondary plan is that it has been working. We have respected it, by and large. Any deviations from it have tended to be with the community's buy-in and have resulted in contribution to the public interest. What is the contribution to the public interest that you're making here that offsets the diminishment of trust in the city's planning processes that would be implied by approval of this project?
I guess the way I respond to that, Councillor, is twofold. First, just because one adds 2 stories of height while squeezing significantly the built form on a site through a secondary plan amendment doesn't mean that it's completely disrespecting the integrity of that plan. I mean, we took great care to look at all the step backs and envision how that secondary plan wants buildings to interface with its surroundings, and we worked very closely to make sure that those fundamental elements were achieved. So to basically blindly follow a secondary plan and never say that it should be looked at differently when I think you can do more successful built form, to me is not the right way to do planning. And in my personal opinion, that's why I always have difficulty with secondary plans that lock down heights so aggressively, because we're forced to do amendments, and the optics of that publicly are that we're not respecting the plan or the community and so on, but in reality, we're trying to work within the predominant constraints of the plan just to find a development option that I think is going to be more interesting architecturally and make for a more successful development.
But this isn't a big, wide swath of the neighborhood that's been zoned with a single zoning. This was a block-by-block community design process that was very fine-grained, detailed, and took hundreds of hours of planning with our city planning staff and with residents. I'm trying to understand the benefit. Sorry, you've answered the question, but I'm not happy with your answer, obviously. If you're going to chip away at such a fine-grained exercise undertaken by a group of very sophisticated residents, there's got to be an offsetting public benefit. And I don't see that here other than the developer profit. And it pains me to say that because, you know, we've had dealings on other projects.
So I don't think we need to go back and forth on that.
We're not supposed to debate, so.
Okay. So does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Casagrande? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members.
Thank you, Jacob, for coming out today. Thank you to Ms. Hode and Mr. Moore. Okay, so now, what? We have a technical amendment. Who's moving that? Then move on to it right now, okay? And then we'll get, where's the technical amendment? Let's get it on the floor. No, I want to get it on the floor. I want to get it on the floor, the technical amendment, okay? Just a minute, let's get the technical amendment on the floor so we have that. So Mr. Vice Chair Tierney, can we get the technical amendment on the, Leeper, Councilor Leeper's moving it?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us what it is in a nutshell.
So there is a technical amendment on this one. I've read the report. It just clarifies some of the zoning language, whereas the report proposes to allow 2 additional stories, a height of 27.5 meters, and a reduced communal amenity area, and whereas document 3 contains the details of the recommended zoning, and whereas further clarity is required on the point of measurement for the building stepbacks, therefore be it resolved that document 3 details of the recommended zoning, paragraph 2A, be revised by replacing the word facing with closest to, and be it further resolved that pursuant to the Planning Act subsection 3417, no further notice be given. Happy to move that and see it supported. Doesn't mean I support the building.
Okay, so can you just, in a nutshell, give us like just a pictorial of that?
The language that's currently in the zoning amendment speaks to the stepbacks from, I believe right now it says the wall facing the property line, Hamilton. That's not very clear, so.
Well, by definition, the front wall is always the wall that's...
Speak up, please, Steve.
By definition, the front wall is always the wall that's the closest to the front property line. But then again, in that definition, it states for residential buildings. This building is a mixed-use building, has commercial space at grade, so we just wanted to bring clarity to make sure that all step backs that were mentioned in the presentation are measured from the front wall that is at grade. Just brings clarity to it.
Thanks.
Now, on to...
Right. So again, I have the same question I had with the previous application with respect to the UDRP. And the Urban Design Review Panel was even clearer with respect to the height on this development than it was in the Oblate's proposal that we just heard. The panel suggests capping the building at the 20-meter limit required in the official plan in order not to set a precedent of overdevelopment in this area. Are they wrong?
Well, staff has used the UDRP comment. May I say, it has given staff leverage to shave off mass in the frontage, in the front facade and in the rear facade. So this building initially came in as a 9-story, was dropped down to an 8-story. Staff were not necessarily comfortable with the step backs. It went to UDRP. UDRP mentioned about the height. So we talked again with the applicant, asking to increase the rear setbacks and the rear step backs, in addition to front step back where staff were already satisfied that they were sufficient to meet a 45-degree angular plane. And I should say about the experience, like the traditional Main Street experience that is meant to be projected along Hamilton, from a street experience, if you're by the building, you will not see those additional stories. If you're across the street, again, by a street experience, you will not see those additional stories. The only way you will see those additional stories if you're standing in the park, but then again, it doesn't affect the use of the park because it doesn't create shadowing. Looking at those additional stories from the park becomes a visual preference.
But there, by definition, there will be shadow impacts on parts of the neighborhood with the increase of 2 stories, I assume.
No, may I run through the front step backs? Would you like to go into
It's
those
actually
details?
the rear I'm more interested in. So, Hinton Avenue is also getting redeveloped at the 6-story heights. And if you are on the 5th or the 6th story of a new 6-story building on Hinton Avenue, you're going to see those additional 2 stories on top of the Hamilton Avenue buildings.
I agree.
So, I mean,
but may I run through the improvements that were made? Like the as of right zoning only requires a 3-meter setback for the first 3 stories at the back. Okay, whereas in this development, right at the 2nd story and 3rd story, we're at 6.6. So if you mirror 2 development, okay, so this one at the 3 meters, and the property at the back on Hinton at 3 meters, that gives you 6 meters. The as-of-right zoning would allow for a third story to be 9 meters. So there you would certainly have shadowing. With this development, at the second story, we're at 6.6 meter. Okay, so mirror that, you're at 13.2 meters, which is significantly more than the addition of the 3 meters. So staff did not ignore the UDRP comment, but have used the UDRP comment to have leverage in shaving off significantly, like all setbacks, like the second and third story at the back are at 6.6 meter. The fourth and 5 are at 7.5 meter as required. And on top of the fifth story, you're at 8.9. So you're almost 9 meters. So if you mirror the 9 meter, 18 meter, so the rear and the front experience is not really being affected. So yes, you will have people in the park that will be seeing those additional 7 and 8 story. Yes, you would have occupants on a building at the back looking at those additional stories, but you already have occupants on the lower stories that will be looking at each other.
Okay. I get it. So just 2 more questions, Chair, because I know folks do want to get out. On page, I lost it, page 12 of the document, and I think this is a really interesting paragraph. On page 12 of the staff report, it makes note that there is also a 12-story mixed-use building to the south, the Irving Greenberg Theater Center, specifically located at the northeast corner of Wellington and Holland Avenue North. An 8-story residential apartment building is also located immediately to the north of the Irving Greenberg Theater Center. I'm wondering why that is relevant, because the community and city staff at the time had a vision for how the mixed-use area was going to transition from the traditional main street of Wellington Street, anchored by that gateway of the GCTC building, and then go down towards, move into a lower area in the south of the mixed-use area, up to the very dense buildings that we are going to see to the north of that. Is this paragraph in there because staff don't share that vision that's outlined in the CDP? I'm just trying to figure out how a gateway building on the edge of the mixed-use area is relevant here.
Go ahead. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Basically, with respect to taller buildings in the area, they're mentioned in the staff report to give context to the overall larger area. Also, there was also mentioned, and actually by one of the people who spoke here before, about to the north there in Armstrong, where you're allowed to have taller buildings. So it's basically to give a context, a wider context that goes down to that gateway that you're talking about. There is a vision, of course, within the secondary plan, and of course, when we analyzed what we have here before you, we felt that it was not in conflict with that vision. As shown on the screen here, we have the 45-degree angle that's being maintained. We have that 1-to-1 street ratio. Those top 2 stories are set back, and well, yes, Madam Chair, they will exist, and they do exist. It was just to show that there are other taller buildings within the wider concept of the general area, and also we can support a higher building on this location because it is not in conflict with the other policies within this plan.
So obviously I disagree. And then the last question I have for you is something that's come up a couple of times, and I think I want to ask you about it. Mr. Casagrande said the secondary plan, doesn't necessarily contemplate the arrival of LRT because LRT wasn't formally funded at that point. Does our secondary plan contemplate, was it planned with the arrival of LRT at Bayview and Tunney's Pasture stations?
Madam Chair, a couple things. One, I would assume that discussions during the CDP, and although I wasn't involved, but it would make sense that discussions during the CDP and the secondary plan would have involved the LRT, or would have been mentioned or thought of. But two, I would submit that
so be it. But you can also amend a secondary plan after that fact. And when, as I said, when secondary plans are not cast in stone, they're there. You're to evaluate the policies of that secondary plan in relation to the primary plan, and whether or not a proposal conflicts with those, contradicts them. So it might very well have been so, but my opinion, as a planning opinion, is that that might be the case, but you're going to evaluate this application on its own merits and how it fits in with the surrounding area. And based on not conflicting with the other policies, it is a good proposal to have council approve.
But the fact that LRT is coming to Bayview and Tunney's Pasture doesn't change the principles of this plan. This plan's fundamental underpinnings were to deal with the intensification that we were expecting in the arrival of LRT, particularly at Tunney's Pasture.
And Madam Chair, it is our opinion that the proposal before you still is in line with the underpinnings of that plan.
Okay. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions? Anyone else have any comments? Wrap up, Councillor Leeper? Well, no one else wants to. Okay, thank you.
The only thing I want to warn my colleagues about around the table, and certainly Rick Councillor Shirelli and Councillor Tierney, Councillor Brockington, you are all going to have community design plans and secondary plans in your neighborhoods that are going to contemplate the arrival of LRT. You're going to want to plan for the growth. And when you announce that Planning Committee and Council have approved those plans, you're going to want to speak to the residents in your communities and say, here's how our community is going to grow. And if we keep chipping away at new, modern secondary plans like we have in Wellington West, you're not going to be able to tell your residents that these plans provide certainty for what happens when LRT arrives. I think we plan for growth and then we stick to the plan. So I would ask you not to support this application. The land was purchased in the knowledge of what the secondary plan was, and it's still a relevant secondary plan.
That's good comments, but you were unfair in not mentioning me, because I actually have a dedicated bus rapid transit corridor already, and we have a town center CDP that was approved in 2006, which we're now changing to Barrhaven downtown. Bottom line is, it's the convergence of two BRTs that are actually existing, and that is where you're going to see height. So, I mean, for Barrhaven, which the highest thing was a cell tower by the fire station, and now we have Lapines building an 18-story. It's really like outside the norm for suburban. You're seeing that in Canada. You've been seeing it for a few years, but you're starting to see that now in Barrhaven. So I actually asked Minto and Richcraft to do the official plan amendment, because it was so out of touch with that. So,
Developers at the table when you're doing that.
Yep, they had to. There was like 900 years of supply of condos in Barrhaven when 11 a year sell. So, okay. So on this item of official plan and zoning bylaw amendment 16 and 20 Hamilton Avenue. Yeas and nays. Oh yeah, your amendment first. Yeah, does that carry?
Carried.
Pardon? Yes, amendment's always first. And then on the item as amended, we want yeas and nays from Councillor Leeper, Councillor Dudas, Councillor Gower. They're dropping like flies. Councillor Shirelli?
Yes.
This is on the report as amended. Councillor Leeper?
No.
Councillor Brockington? Yes. Councillor Blais? Councillor Moffat? Councillor Hubley? Yes. Vice Chair Tierney?
Yes.
And myself, yes. Sorry, Erwin, come on up, please. You're opposed to this development. This development is in Councillor Brockington's River Ward. We also have with us Barry Hoban and Jamie Posen from Fulton to to speak to it if you want to. Okay, Mr. Dreesen, we received something from you yesterday.
Yes.
Thank you, and thank you for hanging around. So go ahead.
Let me start up front, Madam Chair, as I did in 2004, when an earlier zoning amendment was proposed for this parcel, that I'm very much in favor of development of these two parcels on Brookfield Road. They're a prime example, of which there are many in the city, of the potential for intensification. These parcels have sat vacant for way too long, and moreover, aiming for the Carleton University student market is also an excellent idea. Going by what I have seen on my street, which is just around the corner, there definitely is a demand for student housing at this location. Still, I object to the proposal before you for one key reason, and you've heard that a lot this morning. It does not respect the Riverside Park's secondary plan. Our secondary plan came about as a result of a visioning exercise and neighborhood plan in the mid-90s. A plan which I helped create. In fact, it was my introduction to community activism and land use planning, and as they say, the rest is history. The secondary plan designates these and adjacent parcels as mixed use, intended as a transition between whatever Canada Post might do on the north side of Brookfield Road and the single-family houses to the south. According to the secondary plan and zoning for Confederation Heights, those potential north side office buildings are restricted to 4 stories, being themselves a transition from the 12-story Canada Post towers at the corner of Riverside Drive and Heron Road. In no way can buildings up to 9 stories be seen as a transition between those potential Canada Post buildings and the single-family houses on Egan and Hobson Roads. Yet that is what staff is trying to convince us of, and as ever, since 2004, when this matter came before your predecessors in an earlier attempt to accommodate a developer. We are asked to understand the word transition to mean anything but building height, land use, density, architecture, landscaping, you name it, anything but the most obvious and common sense interpretation, height of buildings. Staff in Foten point out that the secondary plan does not specify heights for these mixed-use parcels, in contrast to more recent secondary plans, which are explicit in linking transition to heights, as if that excuses them and you from applying common sense. In fact, the report's reference on page 7, this report, to the transition-oriented design guidelines speaks of transition, you guessed it, in terms of building heights. If the absence of specific heights in our secondary plan is a weakness, then the fault lies with planning staff at the time, which should have been more diligent in expressing the clearly expressed views of the community through the visioning and neighborhood plan exercise. There is a remedy for this situation. If this land transaction is like any other that I'm aware of, its terms are not final until the relevant approvals have been obtained. The value of the land is very much a function of what can be built on it. If the applicant is told that no more than 4 stories to the north and 2 stories at the back are allowed, the price of the land will drop accordingly. All that is required is for this committee and council to stand behind the spirit and letter of our neighborhood's secondary plan. And this, by the way, would bring the development in conformity with Section 361 of the as amended by OPA 150, which sets, except along arterial roads, the maximum height in general urban area at 4 stories. I know that due to timing, this does not apply here, but it surely indicates the intent of council. There's one other argument used by staff, and it's a surprising one. The assertion is made that the secondary plan does not trump a zoning bylaw. This runs counter to the most elementary principles of land use planning in Ontario. And I won't go through the hierarchy that I'm sure you are aware of how planning is supposed to work in Ontario. In 2004, there still was a 2-story office building with an underground fuel storage tank on the eastern portion. That's now demolished. The rest has been vacant land or parking lot forever. I don't know I'm not aware of how these parcels got their zoning before the secondary plan was adopted. But obviously, the zoning should have been adjusted to conform to the secondary plan.
10 seconds.
And as I understand it, this is by no means the only case where the city failed to correct the zoning after something changed at the official plan level. Final point?
Well, thank you.
No more.
Thank you very much. Anybody have any questions? Okay, no questions, but questions for staff. Thank you very much, Mr. Dreesen. Barry Hoban and Jamie Posen, do you want to come forward? Sure, come on up. You're registered. You don't have to if you don't want to, sir.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of committee. My name is Jamie Posen, Senior Planner at FOTEN. Of course, with me is Barry Hoban, and I think the staff report really does a good job of addressing some of the concerns that were raised. I'm certainly happy to hear the community member moments ago say that he's very happy that the site will be redeveloped. We certainly share that view. I guess I'll just add with regards to the primary concern about transition, it's certainly not just about building height, and certainly staff is correct in the report to mention that there are not specific building heights here, but I think achieving a transition in land uses, and so I think the two secondary plans in conjunction that apply here basically are looking at how do you transition from a high-density employment area to a low-density residential area? And one of the ways that it suggests you do that is through a mix of uses, and that's exactly what's being promoted here and proposed here through a mix of uses with retail at grade and residential above. Perhaps for any more detail, I'll defer to staff, but we are certainly in agreement with staff report.
Okay, so we'll just see if there are any questions. Any questions of the applicant? Not of the applicant? No, no questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But we do have questions of staff arising from the delegations. Councillor Brockington, followed by Councillor Leeper. Do you have a question?
Yeah, just,
okay.
You know what, actually, no.
All right, so Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to a question for legal. First, I just want to acknowledge, I didn't have a question for Mr. Dreesen, but I do want to acknowledge he's a very active and engaged member of the community. He's intelligent and he follows files closely, and I appreciate his interest in this file for quite a while and questions that he's raised, and I've tried to facilitate for the past many, many months. To Mr. Mark, through you, Madam Chair, Mr. Dreesen references the Riverside Park secondary plan. It's an older plan. It's certainly not a recent plan, but was there specific wording that capped building heights on the property in question?
Madam Chair, staff went through this on the prior application in 2003, 2004, and they concluded at the time that there was not. That was a decision of City Council. A zoning bylaw was passed on that basis. And that certainly stands as something that if there were ever an appeal to LPAT, the city would be held to, Madam Chair.
And reference was made about transitioning from the Canada Post headquarter buildings, which are at Heron and Riverside, and as you work your way south towards the residential community, the expectation, or in Mr. Dreesen's words, the intent of council would be that as buildings got closer and closer to the residential community, their building heights would be lower than those immediately north of them. Is that reflected in the wording of the secondary plan, or is again interpretation, or how can you explain the concerns raised?
Madam Chair, it's not reflected in the wording in the secondary plan, but I would look to your planning staff to explain transition. It's more a planning approach than a legal approach, Madam Chair.
Yep.
Through you, Madam Chair. The official plan does have a section with respect to building transitions, and it does talk about incremental changes in building height, the mass and character, architectural design, and building setbacks. So it's not only height, but other elements of the proposal as well.
Okay, I don't have any further questions for staff. I do want to make some comments, so I don't know if there are any others who have questions first.
No one else has any questions, so go ahead. No?
So just very briefly, can I be reminded the age of the secondary plan? When was that approved by council?
The Confederation Heights Secondary Plan was 1997, and Riverside Park was 1999.
Okay.
Old Ottawa.
20 and 22 years old.
But what's really changed?
So, Madam Chair, I live very close to this proposal as well. I call Mr. Dreesen my neighbor. We're not next-door neighbors. We live very close and have co-served at different times on the community association. He's right that there was an old JDS office building here which closed many years ago and has sat vacant for many years. And Brookfield Road is aesthetically not pleasing. Yes, there's a high school, which I went to, and there's a small family-run mom-and-pop shop, the Brookfield Confectionery, close to Riverside, but it's not a warm and inviting street by any stretch of the imagination. The city is investing in a multi-use pathway on Brookfield Road, connecting the Sawmill Creek pathway system to that goes through Hog's Back and Vincent Massey. That's starting actually next month and will be a great addition. And, you know, the current community, going back to 2015, has been engaged on this item. This was actually the first planning file that came across my desk in February of 2015, and there's been an ownership change on the land and a number of public meetings and interest in getting it right. And some of the concerns of the abutting neighbors was the proximity of these buildings to their property line, and some compromises were made. The massing, tallest part of these buildings, is actually hugging Brookfield Road, and some of the shorter buildings on this property are to the rear, which provides some relief for neighbors. The minimum setback of 7.5 meters was amended to be greater. I believe it's 20 meters, and as a compromise, some of the building heights went up closer to Brookfield. And that's because the community that was active in this process made that request. So it may not be perfect, but certainly this is by and large from the community a welcome addition. We are close to the O-Train station, Mooney's Bay Station, which, if it's geared towards post-secondary students, will be ideal for them, and certainly the 87 bus route will be good if students don't go to Carleton University in particular. The other want that many in the community like is the ground floor retail component. There is a shortage of retail opportunities in the community, and folks acknowledge that we shouldn't be driving out of the community for some of the more needed type of services. So for a property that's been vacant for many years, there's sort of a welcoming feeling in the community to have this come in, acknowledging some of Mr. Dreesen's concerns, which I'm sure he won't be satisfied with, but have tried to facilitate through the planner, the senior planner, the general manager of planning, Mr. Mark, have all been engaged to try and provide some context to secondary plans which are now over 20 years old. So on that, Madam Chair, I will be supporting the staff recommendation before us.
Thank you. Pardon? So on the item zoning bylaw amendment 716 and 770 Brookfield Road, is that carried? Thank you very much. Okay, the next, thank you for the people that have stayed around. I know it's been a long haul. I can tell you, in the old days, it used to be the haul used to be a lot longer. Like 9:30 in the morning till 9:30 at night was not rare. Right, Councillor Shirley? So the next item, and is John Negru here? Negru? Hi, John, come on up. Again, I was thanking you. You're not getting paid to sit here, and I appreciate you. Oh, I bet it does. Yeah, on why not to run for city council. And especially don't put your name forward or be voluntold for the planning committee. It's because you're good at it. Welcome, sir. We're here on this item. It's official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for 1117 Longfields Drive and 1034 McGarry Terrace. You have 5 minutes, as I'm sure you now know.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and councillors on the members of the Planning Committee. I am the Secretary of the Board of Directors of OCSCC 922, which is the Minto Ampersand community directly south of the properties in question here. The intersection of Sioux Holloway and Marketplace Avenue is the sole north and west exit for this community, which comprises 112 units. There is another condo complex in the area with about another 100 units. So there's a lot of focus for all of these folks to exit by that intersection. Because of the building of the retirement community on the southeast corner of Marketplace and Sioux Holloway, we have been dealing with construction traffic for about a year, and now with the construction of the Lapine apartment buildings and the Diamond Storage facility, the developers there have opened up McGarry to Marketplace as an access point for them, and traffic has become something out of a Tarantino movie, and it's only going to get worse.
And this is a construction traffic you're talking about,
Yes,
is that? Yes.
Construction traffic, but we also anticipate increase in numbers in traffic when the buildings are finished from the residents. And we're particularly concerned about Lapine's desire to reduce the number of parking spots on the property, which is going to force those people out into the community. Now, we are not opposed to the buildings or the development. What we are requesting, and I'll just diverge here for a moment to say that I'm a retired high school teacher, and I used to teach urban planning and project management, and in fact was the person who developed the curriculum for all of Ontario on those two subjects for specialist high schools, major high schools specializing in construction. So I do have a bit of a background in urban planning, and one thing I can say is that any urban plan that does not incorporate intelligent traffic planning is doomed to some kind of big problems down the line. So as it stands now, there is no traffic regulation at that intersection. We have been asking for a four-way light to be incorporated into the plan. We were told that McGarry would not be connected to Marketplace, but it has been. And so we presume that that is some kind of a precedent for the developer to leave it that way. We are asking immediately for a four-way traffic stop so that there's some semblance of order to the traffic, but in the long term, we're looking for a traffic light. There's also a commercial lane about 30 meters down the way, which complicates it, and then a crosswalk even further than that between the Staples and the Walmart. So basically, we're fine with the motion to deal with the parking, but we just want to make sure that it includes consideration of the traffic implications. Thank you very much.
So, thank you. So where are you looking for? I mean, obviously I know the area better than anybody, really.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the commercial lane is behind the Staples and the Winners and that sort of thing.
Right.
The pedestrian cross, PXO we call it, in front of the Staples to the Walmart, that's a new thing. As you know, we only have one set of lights along that whole marketplace, and that is, where the transitway is. So I don't think it's the intent of this being an access to Marketplace for the people, the Lapine people, the people that may live there. I personally think that the access, and if that is, that's a whole different thing. But I think right now it's for purposes of construction. Let's just ask staff that for first of all.
Yes, that's correct, Madam Chair. At this time, McGarry will not punch through the Marketplace. It's construction access only.
Okay, so what is the intent, the long-term intent?
The long-term intent is to connect, and that will be revisited with Phase 2 of this development.
Okay, so the delegation is right to be concerned then, you know, because we see this too many places on, farther down Strandherd, I have a new one with Minto that is, you know, no one gave any consideration to the fact that Strandherd is what it is, awful. And so this case, I think that what we need is probably, this is not in my ward, this is in Councillor Meehan's ward, but I think what we need is probably a direction to be monitoring that very closely. To have a look right now to make sure that the standards are what they need to be for that construction traffic to come in and out, but also for the next phase to have a serious look, make that one of the traffic considerations without question. Now, as far as some of the other concerns that I did hear from somebody who owns in Ampersand, I don't think they live there. I think they live in Stonebridge. It was the question of the traffic that's parking on Sioux Holloway and that sort of thing right now. I would suggest in that case that you have a chat with your councillor and get her to speak with traffic staff who can look at maybe some remediation and that they can do regardless of anything else happening.
That is actually how I got here. I spoke to her office, was referred through a couple of minions who eventually told me to come here and make my case to you for starters, and then to go to traffic planning later. So I just wanted to be on the record here.
Well, they should facilitate that for you.
Yeah, they should.
Well, you heard it at committee, that they do that.
Yes.
Okay? All right, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry
Thank
for
you.
the wait. Sometimes it's a short time and sometimes it's a long time. Today was one of those times, but it must have been interesting.
It was. Yes.
Good, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody have anything else on this item? So on 1117 Longfields Drive? Yes, we do have 5. We have 5. Nobody else can leave. Yeah. Carried? Thank you. Now, on the last item, which Mr. Chown, I think, are you still here, Murray? No, it's John Riddell. Oh, John Riddell, sorry. I just saw the corner of the hair. I would never confuse the two of you. I'm not sure why you stayed, but I know that obviously it was important to you. It's item number 7, which is the front-ending report on March Road Sanitary Sewer and Water Main Canada North Urban Expansion Area in Councillors Suds and El Chanteri's areas. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. It has been a long day, and I'm not, I did want to stay. I want to indicate our support for the report. However, I wanted to point out one issue that I just want to be on the record. We've had, we're over budget on the project significantly, and the budget was prepared last year based on projecting forward from 2018 prices. What we're seeing this year is significant construction increases in both public sector and private projects to the tune of about 20 to 30%.
20 to 30%?
Yeah, which is quite significant on a DC funded project like this. So the report as it's written is based on the budget that was prepared last year, and it's what's in the DC background study. We did close tenders yesterday on the project, and indeed we're up about 30%. So we are moving forward.
Was still here.
We are moving forward with the project. The objective is to get into construction in August of this year, but we'd like the opportunity to talk to staff about the process for increasing the project budget.
Okay, so I think, Derek, is there, no, there's a motion on the next one. So Derek, 20 to 30% increase in anticipated costs. And I mean, I think that, you know, I mean, while I'm acting like with awe and shock, the fact is that we know that all the developers are having a heck of a time trying to get construction staff and et cetera, et cetera. It's like, the desert's dry So that's probably driving the prices too. So how do you, this is going to come to council on the, does it have to go to council? Yes, it does. On the 10th? How can we fill in the gaps here to accommodate this? Because we clearly don't have the right people in the room. Mr. Mark, going to comment?
Madam Chair, I guess, and I will invite Mr. Mark to comment, but, you know, with the tenders documents just closing yesterday, city staff have not yet had a chance to review it. I would, you know, I think Mr. Riddell is in agreement that they haven't had a chance to go through in depth those numbers to see if there's opportunities to find additional savings. But, you know, in a typical scenario, and I think the reason that Mr. Riddell wanted to make sure this was raised and on the record today is, you know, in similar situations where we've seen cost overruns that we know about in advance of a project starting. We have, you know, we have looked for opportunities or brought forward opportunities to amend the budget or the amount in the development charge background study. So, you know, we've got a front-ending agreement report before you today that speaks to the funding that's available in the background study. The issue or the opportunity in the future is to amend the background study at some point in the future to reflect the actual costs, and then provide an opportunity like we did on the Shea Road pump station that was the source of much discussion over the last 24 hours to bring that forward and amend that agreement to recognize the costs that we acknowledge are higher than the numbers that are in the background study today.
Thank you. Mr. Mark, anything to add?
Yes, Madam Chair. As you will recall that in the motion that was introduced for Shea Road, we spoke to bringing forward a report in September. Staff have already identified a couple of stormwater matters where it will be necessary to bring forward an amendment to the background study, and there'll have to be a public meeting under the Development Charges Act. And so the preliminary thought that staff have had today in respect to this matter is this could probably be rolled into that, Madam Chair. And I just want to say one of the concerns staff have had in the past when these matters arise is that it's not brought to our attention until after the report is carried. And in this case, where Mr. Riddle has raised it up while the report's going through the process, it's very helpful because it allows us to plan ahead. And as the Shea Road motion said, we think we can probably address it through a report to committee and council in September.
How does that sound, Mr. Riddell?
Sounds good to me.
So you're going to have further conversations. Let us know if there's anything that I need to know before July 10th.
Yeah, and the only thing but it's helpful to carry the report today because it provides the lenders for the developers with confidence that council has authorized at least $10 million in reimbursement.
That would be my comment as well, because we need that report to move forward with the project. So we'd appreciate that approach.
So on item number 7, everybody, that is the front-ending report, March Road Sanitary Sewer and Water Main Canada North Urban Expansion Area. Is that carried? Carried. Thank you. Thanks for coming out. Well, thanks for hanging around. So we had 2 IPDs that I didn't mention. One was monitoring findings regarding amendments to zoning bylaw 2008-250. Is that received? And the other one was hearings, official plan amendments numbers 150 and 180, urban expansion phase. Is that received? Notices of motion, any notices of motion for consideration at the subsequent meeting, which isn't until August the 22nd. Woohoo! Woohoo! We'll have a new sound system and a gavel. Woo! Oh my God, we need a break. Inquiries? Other business? I'm sure there'll be some, hopefully not shady. Okay, we're adjourned. Yeah. Yeehaw, this close to